So, welcome to Maharam 2025. So first, what is Maharam? Maharam is a textile producer. They are committed to fair and diverse creative worlds. They have been giving funding to RISD for student fellowships for 14 years. So that's been 120 fellowships to RISD students, $600,000. Why do they do this? To get artists and designers out in the world, crossing disciplines, bringing people together, and applying their unique ways of thinking and making change. What is the RISD Maharam Fellowship? It's a $5,000 stipend for enrolled sophomores, juniors, seniors, fifth years, or graduate students of any citizenship to support an unpaid summer internship experience, which actually can take place even after the summer, after graduation. At a government organization, a non-governmental organization, or a nonprofit organization, it just cannot be at a for-profit company, in which artists and designers are not usually found, or where artists and designers can contribute to the mission of the organization in a meaningful way. That focus on advancing social progress or safeguarding the environment, or both, as obviously many times these areas are intertwined. There are endless possibilities for any discipline at an organization you care about anywhere in the world. RISD Maharam Fellowships have been in 30 different countries, where you are building language and communication skills that extend beyond art and design, developing skills outside your practice, outside of RISD, exploring the positive impact of artists and designers on addressing problems and issues. What it isn't a standard internship. So this isn't finding an internship, seeing the job description, applying, obtaining the internship, and then doing assigned tasks. It isn't only visual art tasks. Some visual arts is fine. Organizations need help. This is an exchange. If they're asking you to make a brochure or do a website, that's totally fine, but it isn't only visual arts tasks. And it isn't funding for your specific art or design project. What it is, it's an opportunity for you to contribute to an organization you care about in a meaningful way, have a voice in your work with the organization, learn and grow from others, the expert staff, their constituents, the public, and systems, and to gain experience and skills you can't get in the classroom or studio, and figure out ways that artists and designers can have an impact. So in a bit, you're going to hear from our fabulous fellows here in the front row and get a really good idea of what a Maharam could be. But here are 3 examples, just really quickly, to get you, to get you thinking about what Maharam could be for you. So Graciela spent her summer at 826 LA, an organization that focuses on education accessibility. She worked with their team to create and implement a summer writing camp that empowered youth ages 7 to 11 through visual and narrative storytelling. She had the opportunity to be a part of an initiative not only to strengthen their writing skills, but also to inspire creative and critical thinking. Sam interned at What Sheer Flower Farm, an organization that gives away thousands of flowers annually to those in need and supports the local floral economy through job training. Sam worked with their team and community stakeholders to redevelop former factory land into a high-profile, public-facing outdoor space where people can congregate, teach, and learn. And Uni interned with the lighting detectives in Germany, where she worked with scientists and urban planners to investigate the effects of light pollution and develop new ways to approach sustainable lighting. Together, they considered how cities can work with public and private partners to provide holistic lighting master plans that reduce the brightness of the urban environment and the wider impacts of light pollution. So those are just to give you an example. And again, we're going to hear directly where you can ask questions of our fellows of what their projects were like and how they obtained them. So I'm going to really quickly go over the application guidelines and components. So first, where do you find everything about this opportunity? Go to the RISD Careers website, artist resources, grants and awards, and to the RISD Managed Grants. Here you're going to find everything you need to know for Maharam, the guidelines, the Fellows website, and the application. So first, let's look at the Fellows website, because this is the fun part. Here you can read about internships from current and past fellows, all our fellows since 2012. And you can click on Follow the Fellows, and you can get to a blog where you can find out what actually happened during their summer experiences. Going back to the webpage, you can click on the guidelines here, and here is everything you need to know about this opportunity. All the details are in here. It's very comprehensive, but do take time to sit down and read this end to end. I do want to point out the selection criteria. This is a great section to review now to help you find the right internship that's going to work for you and for Maharam. Review this as you develop your proposal so you stay on track. And review this as a checklist as you finalize to address all the important points. Detailed information on every one of the components is found in the guidelines. So there's going to be fields where you put in your personal, academic, and internship information, and then you're going to respond to essays. These are the essays. Do not let the number of questions here scare you. They are here to help you. Use these questions to develop your internship. What do you want to do, and why? A thoughtful, feasible, clear plan is important. Keep in mind, a goal without a plan is just a wish. This is a grant writing educational opportunity, so no matter how far you get into this application, you're going to learn. You are required to upload an internship offer letter into your application. This should be on the organization's letterhead, signed, and include their contact information. Details are helpful to understand the structure, the resources, and what you intend to do. But flexibility and openness are also important. There should be, and there will be some unknowns. Enthusiasm and support from the internship staff really does speak to feasibility. Other application components are your resume, transcript, and one letter of recommendation. Going back to the resources on our webpage for Maharam, there's a link to the application. And this brings you to the online application. This is a very straightforward form-type application that directly follows the guidelines. You can't save the form and come back to it to develop your responses, so you really want to develop your responses offline, and then you'll copy and paste and upload into the application. And be ready. This is not a last-minute grant, and late applications are not accepted. So there are 3 initial frequently asked questions that we see in advising appointments. What is most important to jurors? It depends. There is no formula. Your proposal is unique to you, your interests, and your internship. Outside factors include the pool of applicants, past internships, and what's going on in the world. Is this internship a Maharam fit? It depends. Make your case. There are a few rules. It cannot be at a for-profit company, it must be unpaid, and it must be an internship at an organization in which artists and designers are not usually found, or where artists and designers can contribute to the mission of the organization in a meaningful way. Beyond that, the rest is up to you. How are you advancing social justice, safeguarding the environment, or both? How are you growing your non-art and design skills? What is the impact? How will this experience impact you? How will you have an impact on the organization you really care about? How will you have an impact as an artist and designer in the world? And the third question is, how and when do I start? So you need to get organized and you need to develop a timeline, and I will turn that over to Scott.
Hey everybody, my name is Scott. I'm Scott Malloy. I'm a senior career advisor at the Career Center. I do a lot of things, but one of the things that I do, especially in relation to the Maharam, is I advise prospective applicants along with Lisa, and also manage the Maharam website and blog that Lisa pointed to just a few minutes ago, where you can see examples of the past fellows, you can see the blog posts where they talk about their stories. So those are the kind of 2 main ways that I'm involved in this fellowship. But to segue, as Lisa did so nicely, into this idea of a timeline. So what I'm going to talk with you about is basically, hopefully by the time I'm done speaking, you will have a pretty solid understanding of so you sit here on the evening of November 13th, right? And you're here because you're interested in applying to this fellowship. So I want you to get a handle on kind of starting today, what are the things that you should be doing in this month, the next months to follow, and then even through till the submission, the acceptance, and we'll even talk a little bit about what the actual experience looks like and what your responsibilities would be if you were a fellow and what the requirements are. So my goal is to kind of walk you through from today all the way through to the end of the fellowship experience so you can kind of get a sense of what you should be doing to stay on track. So like I said, today we sit here, it's November 13th, and we're going to look at kind of November and December and what I would call sort of an exploration and kind of outreach stage of development that you should be in if you want to be applying for this fellowship. So what does that look like? What does that mean? So first step, Lisa already pointed to this, but make sure you do review the guidelines that we have posted, that PDF of the guidelines that are on our website. There's a lot in there. In particular, there are essays that you will have to respond to for this application. So you can get a real sense right now, if you were to look right now, at like what is going to be expected of me, what questions am I going to have to answer. That's a good thing to look at well in advance so that you can think about when you're talking to organizations and planning out what you want your proposal to look like, you can have an understanding of the things that you're going to have to speak to. As I mentioned, on the blog and website, you can review the internship experiences of the past fellows. You don't, of course, the idea there is not to duplicate somebody else's experience, but you can get some inspiration, see what past fellows have done, see the kind of work that the fellowship has supported in the past, which might give you a sense of the directions that you can go in. That's the website where you can see the stories as well as the blog posts. I had mentioned, myself, Lisa, Kevin, who's our director, who's not here, as well as all the staff members in our office, quite frankly, are more than willing and excited to speak with you about your ideas. So even if you're not really sure what you want to do, you're sort of intrigued by this idea of this fellowship, you're not totally sure what direction you want to take it in, come meet with us, talk out your ideas, we'll brainstorm with you and help you move forward on the next steps. One of the things that you should be doing, in addition to talking to us, is beginning the process of researching organizations, especially organizations that are working in areas that interest you, as a way to consider options for possible internship hosts, the people that would be hosting you for the fellowship. And I have some suggestions, because that can be a daunting thing. It's like, oh, that sounds great, but how do I actually start doing that, or how do I find organizations? So here are some resources you might tap into. So Idealist is an online resource that's incredibly solid when it comes to exploring professional opportunities within nonprofit organizations and civically based organizations. So not only is it a place where you can find jobs in that kind of a world, but also there's a section of that where you can look at organizations organized by issue or topic area that those organizations look at, and it's all nonprofits, which fits this fellowship perfectly. So I encourage, and it's global too. It's not just the United States, it's not just North America. It's essentially a directory of nonprofits all over the world. For climate and sustainability focused topics, which of course aligns with this fellowship, Climate Base, if you're not familiar with it, is another really good resource. Again, it's also a place where you can find jobs and professional opportunities, but they also, similar to Idealist, have an organizations directory, and you can look at both government and nonprofit organizations that are doing work related to sustainability on Climate Base. Speaking of government, so if you were interested in a government agency as a potential host for your internship, USA.gov has a total and complete list of government organizations in the United States that you can look at and use as a starting point. And then similarly, especially if your interests were skewing more towards kind of science and research, the National Science Foundation also maintains an updated list of research and development centers throughout the United States, which can be a helpful way to start to narrow your focus if that's a direction you want to take your fellowship. So beyond researching organizations, I think another initial first step is to develop what I would call like a list of learning goals that you can, for one, use for yourself to help sort of like articulate and pinpoint the type of learning and type of experience you want to have through this fellowship. But also this will be handy because if you have a list of like research questions or learning goals and outcomes that you have for this experience, that's also something that you can share when you reach out to organizations to propose the idea of a fellowship. It will help them understand what your goals are. Without that, or without that kind of concrete like list of learning outcomes or research questions that you're interested in exploring, it might be harder for them to understand what you're trying to achieve. So doing this at the earlier stages is a good idea. And like I said, after you've done your research and maybe after you've done your list of learning goals or research questions that might be driving your proposal, at that point you're probably ready to start the outreach. This might be more of a December thing, early December, but you are maybe at a stage where you can start the initial outreach to organizations to discuss what an internship within their structure might be. So again, Lisa alluded to this, but just to reiterate the point, this fellowship is unique in that this is not applying to an already established internship within that structure, right? So like it's not, oh, this organization has an internship posted and I'm going to apply to it. This is you in conjunction with the organization crafting a unique experience, a unique internship experience that you are both sort of co-partners in creating and bringing to reality. So that conversation part of this, like the outreach and then developing that internship structure together, is a really important piece. Then you'd move on, and in January, you might be in more of a writing and drafting stage. So what do we mean by that? So ideally, you've made some outreach and started to have some conversations with some prospective organizations, and you might be narrowing down your focus in terms of like the host site that you'd want to intern with, and you would continue conversations with them. And the idea behind that is that through those conversations, you're further developing the structure of the internship, and you're working towards securing that official offer letter where they're saying, yes, we want to have you as a Maharam Fellow intern. Also in this stage, and informed by those conversations, I would begin drafting responses to those application essay questions that I alluded to earlier. Doesn't mean they have to be perfect or complete at this stage, but start to get your ideas down on paper so that you can share it with advisors, you can share it with friends, you can share it with faculty, get feedback, and make sure that you're building the most complete and effective application that you can. As you're doing that, keep in mind these key factors that Lisa mentioned. And this is the selection committee, this is how they'll be evaluating your proposal. So are you ready for the experience? So think about things like coursework you've taken that relates to either social justice or sustainability. Think about clubs or extracurricular activities you're involved in that might be thematically connected, or even past work experience, perhaps, or volunteer experiences that might be related. Things that show you're ready to tackle this problem in some way. Making sure that the internship site is a fit for the Maharam, so not even just on the logistical pieces of it, like that it has to be either a nonprofit or a government organization, but also what they are doing, the work that they're doing day in and day out has a real strong connection to social justice or sustainability. That what you're proposing in the 8 to 12 week internship experience is feasible, right? Like making sure that what you are proposing and saying you are going to accomplish and that you and the organization together are going to build in that span of time is actually achievable in a summer internship, which is a finite amount of time, and it's also going to take you time to get oriented and all of those things. So just make sure that what you're proposing, while impactful, is doable. And that, to the point of impact, that what you are proposing and what you're building in the internship with them is impactful on two levels. Impactful for them, for the organization, and for the community that they serve, or the topic or issue that they're working on, but also impactful for you. How are you going to grow from this experience? How is it going to benefit your trajectory as an artist and designer, and even potentially the directions of your future career and what you do post-RISD? So be thinking about those things in your essay responses. Another step is, in January, if not sooner, try to find a professor or past supervisor who'd be willing to write a recommendation letter on your behalf, because that is a requirement. You need one for the application. And like pro tip, make sure they are kind of fully up to date on the fellowship and know the requirements. So providing them with the deadline for when it's all due, the details of the fellowship so they understand, if they're not familiar with it, they understand what the Maharam Fellowship is, and also sketching out for them the basic elements of their proposal, of your proposal, I should say, and essentially like what you are trying to achieve in this internship, experience. Again, meet with a career advisor to gain further feedback on the essays. You also have to supply a budget for how you're going to use the $5,000 during the summer, and a rough timeline for what your summer experience is going to look like. So getting feedback on all of those elements to make sure they're as strong as they can be. As we move into February, this is sort of like go time. So this is when the fellowship is actually due. So you're in a finalization or finalizing and submission stage at this point. So to the point of the recommender, just confirm and make sure that they will be submitting the letter. It is their responsibility, in a sense. They have to email the letter to Lisa, Lisa's RISD email by noon on February 21st, which is when the fellowship is due. So just make sure that your recommenders are aware of that and are on top of it. finalize all of the application materials, essays, budget, timeline, even the kind of biographical information that you have to submit. This is a couple of things we recommend just to help you through the process and make sure that you're on track. So we recommend that you receive a kind of a verbal offer, a verbal confirmation from your internship host no later than February 7th. And the idea behind this is that if you get it at this point, this gives you real comfort and security that, like, okay, this organization is 100% on board. I've got them locked in. Like, I know that this is a real thing, and now all I have to do is apply and get the award through RISD. So getting that a few weeks in advance just gives you that security to move forward with confidence. And then what is needed for sure, it's nice to have that verbal confirmation, but what we absolutely need is a written offer letter. And we recommend you have that in hand from the organization by February 14th. You absolutely need it by the deadline on the 21st, but we recommend getting it early just to make your life easy and a little bit less stressful. And like I said, application is due on February 21st at noon, so make sure that you are submitting by then, and we recommend early if you can. I know it's tough at RISD. There's a million things going on. You've got studio commitments. Maybe you work a job. It's a lot, right? So we get it. But if you can upload that application and do it at least a couple days in advance, it's good practice. That way, if there's some kind of tech issue or you run into a problem that you weren't foreseeing, you have a little bit of time to work through it. We will not accept late applications. That's why I recommend doing it a couple days, if not sooner, in advance if you can. So, February, you've submitted. Awesome, right? At this point, we're going to talk a little bit more about like what will happen next, especially if you are accepted, just to kind of sketch out for you what this looks like beyond that point. So all applicants will be notified of the selection committee's decision by mid-March. Either way, whether you are accepted or not, you will get notified mid-March. So you will know relatively quickly the decision by the selection committee in terms of whether you've been accepted as a fellow or not. If you are accepted, what happens next? So you are asked to sign a grant agreement and provide promotional materials so that we can feature you on the website and feature you in RISD publications and media. We ask for that in early April. There's then a kickoff and orientation dinner for all the fellows that we do in mid-April. This is where you get to meet each other and hear more about your fellow, the cohort of fellows that you're a part of and understand what their projects are going to be, get connected, share resources if you want to, and we'll also help you sort of like be prepared and ready to embark on the experience. If you are an international student, we also really encourage that all fellows consult with the International Student and Scholar Affairs Office just to make sure that they are handling any necessary visa paperwork that might be needed in terms of their fellowship experience. And then if this is not mandatory, but if fellows wish to receive academic credit for the internship, they must also receive academic approval and go through the internship registration process in order to receive that academic credit approval. Hopping forward to May, June, this is where you are officially registering the internship experience with RISD and receiving your funding. So even though not all of you may choose, in other words, it is optional whether you want to receive academic credit for the experience or not, we do ask, regardless of whether you're doing that, we do ask that you register. It is mandatory that you register the Maharam internship with RISD. There is an ability to register the experience with RISD and do it as a non-credit option, which is essentially what you would be doing. At this stage, probably in late May-ish, we will issue your grant payment. So you actually get the $5,000 upfront. And then it is your responsibility to budget that and make it useful to you throughout the summer experience. So just as a heads up, you get it all at once, and then it's on you to use it responsibly in the ways that are going to make the experience successful and feasible for you. June and August, this is where you're actually doing the experience, right? So you're engaging in the Maharam. A couple of important logistical details and helpful for you to know in terms of the support that you get. So all fellows are required as part of the fellowship to have 3 check-in meetings throughout the course of the summer with the director of the Career Center, Kevin, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. But Kevin, since the beginning of this fellowship, has been intricately involved with all of the fellows' experience, and I'm sure some of the fellows tonight can speak to that and speak to just the level of engagement, passion, and support that Kevin brings to those check-in meetings and just brings to the fellowship in general. So you'll probably hear a little bit more about that. But not only is it a required thing, I think it's also an incredibly helpful thing, because as you work through your fellowship experience, there will undoubtedly be curveballs, things you weren't expecting, and it's helpful to have somebody like Kevin to kind of brainstorm with, even vent about on some level, or vent to, I should say, but also help you work through some of those challenges as you encounter them. For all of you who are lucky enough to get the fellowship, keep in mind it's really important to document the experience and kind of take notes for yourself and document it visually as you go through it. There's a couple of different reasons for that, but one of the big reasons is you are asked at the culmination of your fellowship experience to write a final report, which we then submit to Maharam, to the funder, to the organization that funds this experience. And it's part of how we are able to continue this for future students and future generations, because Maharam, through those reports, is able to read the impact of where their money goes and the types of amazing experiences that they're funding. And so those reports are actually really quite important. And so it's also quite important that you are doing a good job of documenting the experience so that you can write those compelling final reports and we can continue to receive the funding so that students like you can continue to do these amazing things. The other, in terms of documentation, the other thing that happens, we've kind of talked about it a couple times, but you're also required to write regular blog posts on the Maharam website, which again, there's the link, and it's linked on our website as well. It should be easy to find. There are 4 blog posts that are required during the fellowship period. So we kind of encourage them to be spaced out evenly throughout the 8 to 12 weeks, but we give you a little bit of freedom on that, and it's somewhat up to you how frequently you want to do it, as long as you do 4 throughout the summer or throughout the experience. And the posts are typically a mix of kind of text narrative along with visual documentation, whether that's photos, videos, GIFs, animations, whatever the case may be. But it's so that people in the public, people at Maharam, people at RISD broadly can follow what you're doing and see the impact of your work. And then last but not least, in September, I mentioned you'll be asked to submit that final narrative report to be shared with Maharam. And then once you've done that, fellowship is over and you've done all that you need to do and hopefully had an amazing experience. So that's the timeline. Hopefully that helped you sort of get a better read on, again, starting today and moving forward. What you need to be doing to kind of stay on track to submit this, and also get an understanding of what the actual experience will look like a little bit. So real quick, just kind of reiterating what I would recommend in terms of what do you do right now. So this is, like I said, an exploration stage. Start brainstorming. So I would encourage you, start to have conversations with advisors, with faculty that you trust, especially if they're faculty that you know are engaged in work or knowledgeable about work when it comes to social impact, social justice issues, or sustainability issues. Talk with them about your goals, ask their advice, talk with Lisa and I and others in the office. We'll help you out. Start exploring and researching organizations that are doing work that excites you. Again, I showed some of those 4 resources. Those, of course, are not the only 4 resources you could use, but those might be helpful starting points. But start to think about where might I intern? What are some of the targets that I can begin to explore and think about reaching out to? And then just start, whatever your process is, but start free writing, brainstorming, putting your ideas down on paper in terms of the topics and concepts and questions that are going to ideally drive your fellowship experience. Because again, not only will that help you crystallize your own thoughts about what this might look like for you, but it's also going to help you do a better job of articulating what you want to do to your potential internship host, and therefore be more successful and effective in getting that commitment and moving forward with the fellowship. So those are my tips in terms of what to do moving forward in the next weeks and month or so. So with that said, I think we're going to now invite our fellows up.
Just the basics to get us
Cool, great. Okay, hi, I'm Henry. I'm a senior in architecture. I did my Maharam 2 years ago, my sophomore summer. So I'm originally from Toronto, so I did my Maharam in Toronto at the Archives, which is the largest LGBTQ plus sort of independent archives in the world. So there I did a research project on queer sort of infrastructure, queer relationships to infrastructure, home, and sort of domesticity in Toronto. And that culminated with a physical exhibition and a book that we published together. Yeah, super cool experience.
Hello, I'm Alex, and I'm a fourth-year dual degree student. I'm in illustration, and I did my Maharam last summer. I was working with a nonprofit organization based in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that provides programming to primarily pediatric cancer survivors, although they've recently started working with adult cancer survivors. And they provide fully funded programming in the beautiful scenery of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I was able to work with them and work with the kids to develop certain programming revolving around creativity and expression. And yeah, I was just able to get to know the organization and work with them throughout the summer.
Hello, my name is Maria, and I did my fellowship this past summer in the Tijuana River National Estuary Research Reserve. It's a long name. And I had already kind of worked with them, and I had like a relationship with some of the people that work there, and I wanted to know more and learn more because it's in my hometown. So I was able to like be part of the nature-based solutions, kind of a experimental team that wanted to help with pollution across the border, and it was an amazing experience. I loved it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Upasna. I'm from Industrial Design. This is my second year, and I did my internship with Maharam in the previous year. I worked at Bangalore in India for an NGO called as Let's Be the Change, and the NGO was focused in solid waste management, and then they didn't had I was the only designer as the brief was there. And we build a lot of products. So we build products with the community women, we build products for in-house, we build posters and everything. We did a lot of design, and I see that reflected right now in their practice as well. If I check on them on Instagram or WhatsApp group, as everything in India is on WhatsApp. And it's very interesting to see this Maharam gives you a platform to make impact in a smaller NGO and a smaller location. It can be big as well. So it was very interesting.
Is this actually on?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Joe, he, they pronouns. I'm a fourth year in Brown RISD dual degree studying ethnic studies and painting. This past summer, I worked with the Asian American Advocacy Fund, a 501c4 based in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm from, where I grew up. And I was kind of really interested in archiving and documenting Asian American organizing in Atlanta because it's not really archived or talked about in the larger kind of national political landscape. But just from my experience growing up there and how Asian Americans are now seen as the margin that flips Georgia blue or red. I was really interested in talking to organizers about what their struggles were and successes were, working in local kind of politics. And so yeah, I interviewed 15 people over the summer, which is kind of insane. And I'm still continuing to interview people. But ultimately I want this to function as a zine, a physical zine that can be passed around, but also on their website. So I worked with the communications team a lot. But yeah.
How did you start exploring what you were going to do What was the process for starting this out back to 2 years ago for you, Henry, but for everyone else, a year ago? And we don't have to have you all answer, because they might be here, but if you want to, two of you want to jump in and answer that question, so we get a couple range, and then we'll.
Cool. Even though it's like maybe the blurriest for me, I get. Yeah, I had just finished my sophomore year of architecture, and if you're in architecture, you know that's a pretty rough year to end on. So I was kind of interested in Maharam just initially because I wanted to do something not like specifically architecture related. So that was why I did Maharam. I knew I wanted it to be in Toronto, so that narrowed down the location. And I knew I wanted to do something either with sort of housing nonprofits in Toronto, which is a huge issue there and kind of a nexus point with architecture, or something queer related, which is just where I was at in my life at the point. I kind of did a list of like honestly a good group of organizations and just emailed everyone. When that wouldn't work, I just started calling people, which was really stressful because that's not my personality. But I would just like call the front desks and say like, hey, like, is your director in the office, or like is there anyone like I can talk to? And honestly, like, it worked out. Like, I managed to have a couple conversations. I think it came down to basically the archives, or this like housing group for, I think, like houseless youth in Toronto, but it was picked for me by the universe because that one fell through. So yeah. So I would say it honestly was not really well structured, but I just tried to. I mean, you're approaching these people with like a fellowship that they have no idea about, and the concept of you saying like, "Don't pay me, but I'll be paid, so it's fine," is kind of an odd thing to say. So I think just being falsely confident even, and then just like laying it out for them and just making it clear who you are and what you're representing, and then from there, just like being okay with rejection or things falling through. I didn't expect to work at the archives at all when I was at this info session when I was considering, but I'm really glad I sort of fell into it. So also just like being okay with kind of taking the course is what I would give advice about. Yeah.
Oh, okay. How I started working with the Asian American Advocacy Fund was the August, like before I applied. Um, I was like in this like group like art show in like my town, kind of like not super serious, like a little unserious. And I like met like this painter who was like on a panel, and she talked about like her community organizing, Asian American organizing, and her painting practice. And then I started talking to her there, and like and then when I was thinking about like what I wanted to do next summer, like I really was like, oh, like I'm interested in this organization. Like she seems really cool. So over winter break, like I emailed her and was like, hey, can we get coffee? Can we talk? And then that's kind of where I was like, hey, like what do you do? And like how can I work with you? And we kind of like drafted up the Maharam like proposal together of like what does the organization need and in this moment, and how can like I provide that in like pseudo like free labor, because they're not like paying me, and so it was like very like collaborative, and like still is, and kind of like not only what my goals were for the summer, but also like how do I prioritize this organization and like what our community needs. And so yeah, we like continued to talk like maybe 2 or 3 times as I was writing my proposal, and like that like really started our like relationship together. Yeah.
I just had a question of when you reach out to organizations, how was that reaching out? Like we heard from two people, and these were two different kinds of reaching out or communicating. So how did the rest of you reach out, and if you'd have any advice for us?
Yeah, so I guess it was for me, I knew sort of the organization beforehand, sort of similar to Joe in a way. But yeah, my first reaching out was just over email and just sort of laying down my interest in working with this organization and sort of explaining what the Maharam is because they don't know anything about it. And then I just requested to Zoom with them, and they were luckily very responsive. And yeah, I think talking face to face and sort of working through something rather than just emailing or going back and forth over messages, actually talking to someone and like planning out a structure was very helpful. And I think I met with my organization like 4 or 5 times before we even like I even got an offer letter. And it was just helpful to be able to like work it through and have a very solid understanding before like diving into the application or diving into like, further into the application. So yeah, does that answer your question?
I didn't knew of the organization that I would be working with, but I knew that where I want to work. So I looked at it as a place that I want to go, and I knew that I wanted to go to Bangalore in India. So I started to like Google NGOs based on that location, and then I used to like just cold email them, and I made sure to write unpaid internship in the subject so that they know that they don't have to pay me and like I'm looking for unpaid internship. And then like I just like emailed bunch of them, but I also went ahead and emailed this bigger NGOs in India, and surprisingly everyone wrote back to me saying that okay, you can work with us, but they were not as responsive. And you know that we are on a deadline, and like I wanted someone who would respond to me faster, and like if I asked them for an offer letter, they should give it to me like to meet the deadline. So I found this NGO, Let's Be the Change, who were like young people in it. So they understood like I want what I wanted from them and what they wanted from me. So after I reached out to like 10 people and I spoke with like 5 of them, different NGOs, and then I chose them. Like I was like, I like you and I like what the work that you're doing. And there were other people, they were also doing good work, but then I was more interested in this NGO. And then I met with few of them over Zoom, and then we co-drafted the proposal and like decided on like this, there are these 5 projects that they are interested in doing with me. And then I was like, but what would I get? And then they were like, so and so. Like there was this exchange afterwards, but initially cold emailing and telling them that. And then I told them also like I would be getting $5,000, and like that is like my money because because they were not paying me anything, but I thought like transparency was key over there.
Yeah, and that's just I think a lot of good points in there. But just to clarify that last one, that $5,000 is for you, right? And so what we discourage and what we don't want is that $5,000 somehow gets transferred to the organization and is like, they're using it to buy equipment or something like that. It's like that money should be benefiting you and your ability to have this experience. And so, just reinforcing that idea of like, standing firm on that. It's not usually too much of an issue, but in case there's any confusion or a lack of clarity for the organization, that's an important part of this that you do have to have a understanding of and a firm grounding in.
Before we hear from Maria, not being paid is also something that you can use as you're developing the proposal. So not only just to get them interested, but because they're not paying you, it does give you more voice in your work, and it gives you the opportunity to negotiate with them and then even during the grant that, reminding them, I'm not an intern that you're paying me to do certain tasks. So that you have to kind of keep that in mind throughout the experience. But Maria, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah. So for me, I had already worked with them, and I knew of them, and I knew that I wanted to continue that kind of work. So it was very easy for me to just ask for time to get an update at what has been done like in the time that I wasn't there. And then I said, hey, so there's this opportunity that I would really like to to continue with you guys. And I asked to work with a particular person that I didn't know before, but I knew that their position would like help me see more things. So I asked for that, and they gave me the like. I reached out in December. They gave me the letter in January, super quick. So, yeah, yeah, a dream.
I have a question about when you're planning structure and timeline. Is that something that you plan with the organization, or it's something that you suggest the organization and they tell you changes, or is it planned collaboratively with them?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation with them, and depending on like what they have like going on like on the pipeline, you can suggest like, oh, this would be really awesome to develop this portion with me, and I can do this and that. So it's definitely a conversation.
For me, it was, yes, it was a conversation again. Like we co-created the timeline, and also with timeline there comes projects. So they suggested that maybe we should do 7 projects in 2 months, and I was like, maybe not, and because that was like too much expectations, and then we negotiated some terms, and then we finalized 5 projects, which I did in 2 months with them. So and I think timeline is kind of flexible as well, because you may propose something, but something else may happen on field. But yes, there is a co-creation aspect that happens between organization and
Guys, like, how did you navigate the possibility that like the organization might want to might be willing to partner with you for this fellowship, but if you don't end up getting this fellowship, there's a possibility that like depending on your financial situation and like what you want in the summer, you like might not be able to like go through with the internship if you don't get the fellowship. So I was just like wondering if like that was something like a concern that you guys had all the time. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think throughout the entire like communication process with the organization, it's just important in every aspect to be transparent, not just about like the unpaid nature, but yeah, that it is a possibility that like if you didn't get the fellowship that you wouldn't be able to do the work. I think that's completely valid to say and be very transparent about, because again, they're not losing anything. Like all they can do is like gain your potential collaboration. So yeah, transparency is just important.
Can
Yeah.
happen in, oh, sorry.
I would just say like apply for other things too, like just in case you don't get it. It's just realistic thinking about like what are your options for the summer and like how can you get a job. And yeah, I think like I like applied for other like fellowships and like jobs, and then I like did like the interview process for like another Asian American organizing fellowship. Like ultimately was offered the position but turned it down because I was like, I got the Maharam Fellowship and this is work that I want to do more, plus I'm getting paid for it. And so like yeah, I think just being like transparent with the people that you're working with, but also like real with yourself that like you like should get paid, and like unless an unpaid internship is something that you're comfortable with doing.
Yeah, did the whole experience work as you guys planned, according to proposal you guys proposed? Or has it changed? Was it better, worse, and what has changed, if you guys want to share? I'm sorry, it's a long question.
Mine changed a lot. So I was low key by the end. I was like, did I lie on my whole application? So I like did well. I mean, obviously, it was like I sorted out the structure with the director at the time. The director through the whole thing. But by the time I got there at like the start of July, she was basically like, okay, like honestly, maybe you need to just stay in the archives for like a couple weeks, like research, find things out, and then we'll kind of see if the old timeline makes sense, which is so true, at least with the nature of my fellowship. Like this was a ginormous archive with hundreds of thousands of materials that I hadn't even looked at before. So it just made sense to kind of, okay, like let's be humble, like let's start from ground up and see what's going on. So originally the application was a lot about sort of community projects that we wanted to do. They have like partnerships with the sort of like the gay village that they're in Toronto, and so sort of like that, some installation work, lots of things we're excited about. But you know, I spent all this time in the archives. I talked to a lot of the archivists, and I mean, what's really wonderful is you're also meeting people with expertise that is completely different than anything you've experienced before. So I was meeting sort of librarians and conservationists, and I realized like, oh, like there's sort of a wealth of material with sort of the built environment and infrastructure, these sort of interesting ways people use space here, like let's do like an exhibition, like let's make that public. And then I think it really developed as it went, right? Like I think a lot of the people here also worked with people outside the organization. Like I understand sort of that. I think interviewing 15 people is crazy because I like also did a lot of sort of interviews and community work with sort of prominent people in the area and in the city, and sorting that out, like that's not going to go to plan. Like people are free when they want to be free. So it really, I think, changed along the way. But it was nice to have Kevin there 3 times, and kind of just like updating him on what changed. So yeah, like the end was honestly very different. But I think, I mean, the application was still great to sort of start with a sort of common understanding of where our mutual strengths were, but then being able to be flexible and I was very okay with just being thrown around.
Yeah, it changed a lot, and it was for the best. I feel, because I had a good plan. Like I was going to implement like nature-based solutions in different communities, but the the organization that I was partnered with is run by 4 different. It's run by the California Parks, by the Fish and Wildlife Services. It was run by NOAA and the County of San Diego or something like that. So there's a lot of like logistics and like behind the scenes things happening, and the projects really depend on the funding. If it really gets, if the project actually gets the funding. If not, then they have to postpone it, and like they have to work with something else. So it's a lot of like moving parts, and so the project that I was supposed to actually be working on didn't happen until later. So I ended up being more in a supporting role in different like social events and workshops and all of that, and it was great because I mean I get very nervous with people and I feel like it really pushed me to like get outside of like my comfort zone and actually meet people who are like working in very very different things, and like it's fascinating. I learned a lot, and also like I like this is my hometown, and I wanted to know like who is actually doing what, and like I wanted to know people in there. So because like being all the way over here, feel so disconnected from home. So I needed a way to plug in. So it was great for me. It changed a lot.
I love, and I really just want to highlight something you said, which is that what you were doing in the fellowship, especially in the way that it changed, pushed you outside of your comfort zone. I just think that's such a phrase to focus in on, because I think in so many ways that's what the Maharam is kind of built to do on some level, right? Which is like your comfort zone, I think, for many of you, right, is probably like what you're doing in studio every day and sort of the class experiences that you have. And this is built to sort of like put you in different environments where you're still utilizing that knowledge, but applying it in a very different way. And sometimes people who are not artists and designers, oftentimes they are not. And so you're having to almost speak a different language or sort of bring them into your world, and they're bringing you into their world. And I think that that's all getting outside of your comfort zone, but it's really meaningful stuff. And so I really appreciated that you shared that and wanted to highlight that real quick. Sorry, a little segue from me. I think somebody else wanted to comment, though. I didn't want to steal somebody's thunder. Good? Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Since the fellowship kind of changes when you started, how do you navigate how much detail there should be in the timeline that you propose for the application itself, so there's space for change?
Since I talked about mine changing, maybe it makes sense for me to explain that. I think there was a broad sort of research phase of the timeline and a broad sort of application phase, and I think there were sort of understandings of also capacity. A lot of organizations have physical locations, so I think in a sense what the timeline and the deliverables are very useful for is just getting a feel for sort of the operations and systems that you'll be operating in. So it was very helpful, even though a lot of the dates changed, even though we were able to be flexible. It helped me come into the fellowship first day with an understanding of what I could talk about, because it's you're just getting kind of thrown in with these people that you've never met. But I would say, so I think it's still great to be thorough, and I think I still was pretty thorough in my application, but I think just doing that with the understanding with your organization that when you show up on the first day, anything could happen. And it's also, you file it in February and then you start in the summer. For a lot of nonprofits, a lot of stuff changes in that amount of time, so they might not necessarily need the sort of services that you're talking about initially, I would say.
I want to say that when I was making my timeline, I was kind of rigid, and then I made date by date timeline, and then I sent it to Scott for checking, and he was like, let us make it week by week, because it was too, I don't know, tight, and then we had to make it more loose, and I think that was very helpful. And also the timeline does change a lot. I did not account for their 11th anniversary celebrations, and that happens for a week, and then they don't work because the anniversary celebration is equally important to a foundation. And so things change, and being a little flexible, or maybe say project-wise timelines would be also helpful. So
It's almost better to err on the side of a rigid plan and then loosen it up rather than something that's just way too good.
I was gonna ask, is this a design exclusive internship? Because I'm from the GSC department, Global Arts and Culture, and ours is academia related.
Also.
Yep. Any major, any discipline.
Yep, there's no portfolio requirement or anything like that, but it's open to any discipline.
So you're eligible.
Are we open to approaching artists, independent artists and designers, or is it just restricted to organizations?
It has to be an organization, nonprofit, non-governmental.
You did mention that it's supposed to be an art and design, not supposed to be an art and design organization. So can it be an organization that works in support of art and design, but doesn't actually do the work in that field? How do you decide? What's the gray area?
Yep.
Very gray. Very gray.
I can comment.
Well, I'll start just from the beginning. You can.
Please go for it.
So Maharam started, just to give you the background, that it was, you have to be working in the government and no art and design. We don't want you doing any art and design, because we want you as artists and designers doing other things in the government. We probably had that first year, I think, 4 applicants or something, because that's just not, it was just so rigid. And so it's kind of opened up over the years, and it is getting very gray now. And you can look at past proposals and kind of see where they land, and that's why there's sort of that or. Like either an organization where they've never had an artist and designer, that's sort of the extreme end, to yes, we do some art and design, but then you still want to find a little bit of your niche. So it's not, and I think to be extremely competitive, you've got a harder case to make if they are already doing art and design, and you can expand on that. But I think this is all about you making your case, and I think thinking a little bit about what Maharam was originally looking for might help you figure that out. And the essays will also ask that question for you to tell us. You tell us.
Yeah. So if you do identify a place that is working closer to art and design or doing more art and design related work, I think what becomes really important in your application is to identify how you are still going to be contributing something that is unique and distinct and maybe different from what they are already doing. So even if it is art and design activity, that you're bringing something new and different that they are not already doing in their art and design activity. Does that make sense? So because if it's just duplicating what their activities are already, that's where I think where you're going to run into some trouble. And that's where it becomes less gray at that point, where it's like, okay, this is maybe not the best fit for the Maharam. So does that help a little bit? Yeah, I think.
And I think the essay questions will kind of help. Those questions will be right there. You have your opportunity to decide how you do it.
Yeah. You know, you've been wanting to ask questions.
How many fellows do you pick each time? And like how competitive would you say acceptance is?
Both good questions.
So they give us $50,000 a year, so that's 10 fellowships a year, but we don't always have 10 fellows a year depending on the applicant pool. I think 8 would probably be the
Yeah,
lowest
7 or
amount.
8 is probably the lowest we've ever had.
And then some years that we've had extra money, and so then the next year it's been 11. I think the most we've ever had was 12, and we've had the highest number of applicants we've ever had was 23. But I would say the average 15, 16 would be probably the average.
So the odds are pretty good. I mean,
For
like,
grants, that's,
yeah. I don't want to make that sound like it's easy. That doesn't mean it's easy. Because the process itself, I think, and the fellows can attest to this, like, it's a lot of work to develop this and work with the organization to get to a point where you're ready to submit. I don't want to scare you, but that is work. But the odds in terms of like how many applicants we typically get and how many awards we award, those odds are like Lisa said, pretty good in terms of like what you see in the grant world overall.
That was effectively my question, just phrased nicer.
Teamwork, I love it. That was good. Awesome. Any maybe last question if anybody has one? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask the fellows, I guess to wrap up, how has the Maharam influenced your outlook on career opportunities and just your own progression as an artist in places you normally don't find yourself?
Oh, okay. Great. Okay. Yeah, changed a lot. Again, like I did it at a time after sophomore year, so I think my sort of perspective of architecture was very surface level. I kind of assumed I definitely did not have a savior complex, but I definitely was like, oh, I'm gonna come in and like build something, and like I don't know, their like physical location will like look nicer, and like my sort of the way I interacted with architecture was much different. And I think like what was nice about my Maharam experience, I mean, one, there was a sense of like a mini ego death, right? Like these are people where design is not their main thing. Like how can you help them? Like how can what you do be meaningful in their lives and their work? That necessitates some level of sort of distancing from yourself, which I think is really nice. For me, it was so not a project I had expected to do, to work on a book, but it gave me like in a very personal way, like gave me a very deep love of sort of writing and research. I talked about it last year, but I was like, I got back to school and declared an LAS concentration, and then I took 2 writing workshops. So like that wouldn't have happened without the Maharam. I met so many cool people, like as like a queer sort of experience. It was also super affirming. And I think where I'm at now, what was so valuable about it was knowing that I was able to take my personal experiences and passions and make them meaningful in a context I hadn't seen before. So being able to, so where I am now in my trajectory, I think what it did for me was knowing that like what I'm interested in is still valid, even though the corporate world is very scary. And it's still doing things for me now. I've made connections at like a couple different universities with sort of researchers in those fields. Like I've talked to students and like people at RISD and Brown that are like interested in these things. Like it's still kind of currently like a wheel in this machine that is pushing my artistic design journey forward. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I guess for me, I wasn't looking at this as a career stepping stone or anything like at all. I was more interested in doing this to explore something I'm passionate about and have the opportunity to just focus on that with like a designated time and budget. And I definitely was able to do that. I mean, I was really interested in like healthcare, and I was interested in working with children and exploring these interests in an unconventional environment, which I got to do. As for how it has helped me in like a career space, like I said, that was never really the intention, but I guess more practically, I do think this experience has sort of like helped me in like ways that I didn't expect. I think it has helped me in like working with people with communication. I think I've brought up this opportunity in like so many different like networking situations and like talked about it. And I think people love to hear about how you're exploring your passions and exploring your interests outside of like a conventional industry environment or a conventional academic environment. And so I think just having that experience and building your like life experiences in this way and your passions is just a beneficial thing and a really nice opportunity that you have. Yeah.
I guess like I think like I came into the fellowship thinking like, oh, like I've never done research before. I've never done community engaged research. I've never like been in like Asian American organizing even in my own hometown, and so like really approaching it as like I'm here to learn and I'm also here to just like figure it out. Like I remember my first meeting with Kevin. I was like, okay, so I flew back home to Atlanta and like I rested for a week, and then my boss was like, oh, like we can't meet in person for a week. So then I was just like still back home just chilling, and I was like itching to do something, and then like he was just like, oh, like I feel like it's like a part of it is that like it's going to change and it's going to like take you into like different like physical literal places. Like I was just driving around Atlanta going to like random mutual aid events, like art events, grocery redistribution, and just like meeting people there and like yapping about my fellowship and being like, do you know an Asian American organizer? Like, do you know someone? And like that's how I like built connections that are like still like sustainable to this day, because I think it's like really important that like you not only like build like earnest connections with people in your community, but also like sustain that and support them. And then like I was also like struggling a lot with like painting the year before and kind of started to hate painting, and like this fellowship like gave me like I don't know, an opportunity to not paint and also like an opportunity to explore like academic or social justice work. And I ironically did paint a little bit like on like a mural in downtown Atlanta, like helping Atlanta Radical Art, like an organization, paint for like it was both like queer and also like pro-Palestine mural painting day, and so that was like really cool. And now I'm kind of like looking forward to also like going back to Atlanta like this break and continuing to do my work and how to like sustain this project in the long term of just like collecting oral histories, archiving, things like that. I also had like another point, but I totally forgot. But yeah, I think it's just like it like makes you think about how you can serve your community and how you can like really like build those connections that will help you in the future. Yeah.
For me, Maharam has helped me like professionally and both like personally. I had never worked with an NGO before, and it was very interesting to see how an NGO works, because like how does a company like does not want to make profit, and like who is funding them, and like it's not only like I got to make designs, but I got to see all these parts, like how is this company getting money, what are they doing with their money, and like all these things that I had not thought about it. Also getting a Maharam Fellowship looks good on your resume, and getting a fellowship, like as she said, like I have been telling a lot of people about it, and it's a good way to say that okay, I can do something, and like I have been awarded for that. uh, Also, it was very humbling to go into like this. My NGO worked with solid waste management, and they had adopted 3 villages to like go there and like do field work. Being a designer, sometimes we are stuck on doing digital work, but this challenged me to like go out there and be in the field and see how my work is getting impacted. We made card games, so like we went there and we played, and like we did a lot of user testings, and like it was interesting to see what like me, maybe like now 1 year in the US and like now going back, I didn't want it to be someone like okay, I now know what to do, but like I was someone, like I was one of them, and like we co-created that game, and it's very humbling and also like a very eye-opening experience to like see how your work actually impacts like the true person on ground.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of put me on the map in the region. I got to meet a lot of people, and I was able to have like really interesting conversations about sustainability, about what people are doing, about how they think, and I was able to like make a case for like more of a like the the landscape architecture field. It's not so it's I feel like it's not a thing over there, but it should be, and I was able to advocate for it. And I like it's all about like keeping the connection and like kind of maintaining it. So I feel like it's going to develop into something. I don't know what yet, but it will.